A mangled body, racked with unimaginable pain, emitted a stench so vile that even the most seasoned courtiers fainted at the mere presence of it. Cadaveric fluids seeped from the coffin, lapped up eagerly by roaming dogs, as if nature itself mocked the once mighty king. This was the horrific and humiliating end of one of history's most feared monarchs. Today we uncover the grim and shocking truth behind the death of Henry VI of England, a story so grotesque that it is rarely recounted in its full, revolting reality. Henry Tudor was born on June 28, 1491. When he ascended the throne at the tender age of 17, he was widely celebrated as the most handsome prince in Europe. Towering, athletic, with flowing golden-red hair and a commanding presence, he seemed the embodiment of royal power and virility. A Venetian ambassador described him as possessing a figure of extraordinary grace, with a countenance so angelic it surpassed that of any other Christian prince. Yet despite his beauty and seemingly boundless vigor, Henry's life would take a dark and degrading turn. The fateful shift began in January 1536 during a jousting tournament in Greenwich. At the age of 44, Henry suffered a catastrophic fall when his horse collapsed beneath him. He lay unconscious for hours, and although he survived, a severe injury to his right leg never healed properly. The wound festered into a painful ulcer, a constant source of torment and humiliation for a king so obsessed with his appearance and strength. Courtiers were forced to endure the stench in silence, knowing that showing any sign of revulsion could provoke royal wrath. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, this period also marked the execution of his second wife, Anne Boleyn, under charges of adultery and treason, which many historians now view as politically fabricated. Some suggest that the head trauma Henry sustained in the jousting accident may have amplified pre-existing tendencies toward paranoia and violent outbursts. With limited mobility, his body began to deteriorate rapidly. Once slim, with a youthful waist of 89 centimeters, Henry's girth expanded beyond 101 centimeters. His weight surged past 180 kilograms, forcing attendants to move him between rooms using specially designed pulleys. Doorways had to be widened to accommodate his bulk. The king's lavish diet played a significant role in his decline. Historical records indicate he consumed nearly 5,000 calories a day, primarily from red meats, with scarcely any vegetables. A single dinner might feature multiple cuts of meat, pies, and prodigious quantities of wine and ale. Combined with enforced inactivity, this gluttony accelerated his physical collapse. Over time, the leg ulcers worsened, treated with methods now known to be harmful: cauterization with red-hot irons, applications of arsenic and mercury, and frequent bloodletting, all of which only weakened him further. Eventually, the sores grew so severe that bone protruded through decaying flesh, the smell so putrid it could be detected from 3 rooms away. At 49, Henry married the 19-year-old Catherine Howard, describing the union as a return to youth. Yet the stark contrast in age, coupled with his grotesque appearance and overpowering odor, made the marriage a disturbing spectacle. Unable to endure her husband's disfigurement, Catherine sought solace in the arms of a young courtier. Upon discovery, Henry ordered the execution of both lovers. His final marriage to Catherine Parr in 1543 was a political alliance more than a romantic bond. Catherine assumed the role of caretaker, tending to the dying king with astonishing devotion, an unexpected mercy given the fates of his previous wives. In his final years, Henry suffered from multiple chronic ailments. Modern specialists speculate he likely endured severe diabetes, advanced gout, hypertension, and heart failure. Some have suggested syphilis, though this remains contested. The combination of illnesses turned his final years into relentless torment. Contemporary accounts describe alternating periods of unbearable pain, during which he would scream and curse everyone around him, and episodes of deep, immobilizing melancholy. Paranoia compounded his suffering. The once brilliant statesman became obsessed with imagined conspiracies, executing loyal friends and advisors on baseless suspicions. Terror reigned over the court, for even a careless glance or a thoughtless remark could be twisted into a charge of treason. Remarkably, in the final days of his life, Henry had ordered the execution of Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, demonstrating the extent of his paranoia. In the days leading up to his own death, his fear of poisoning became an all-consuming obsession. He established an elaborate system to protect his meals. Servants had to taste every dish before it reached his table, and all utensils were meticulously inspected for any sign of tampering. Some historians suggest this fixation was a symptom of his worsening mental instability, possibly exacerbated by recurring strokes that clouded his judgment and heightened his anxieties. As his end drew near, Henry's suffering escalated to almost unimaginable levels. In his final months, he could barely move, even with assistance. Gangrene had taken hold of his legs, intensifying the unbearable stench that permeated the royal court. The once majestic halls became a place of whispered rumors and miasmas, with courtiers covering their noses with perfumed handkerchiefs, while forcing themselves to remain in the presence of their decaying king. During the harsh winter of 1546-1547, Henry's health declined rapidly. He suffered recurring fevers, likely caused by septicemia from the numerous infections ravaging his body. His breathing grew labored, and episodes of delirium became frequent. Witnesses recalled the king murmuring the names of his deceased wives during these moments, particularly Jane Seymour, who had died giving birth to his only legitimate son, and possibly Anne Boleyn, whose ghost was said to haunt his mind relentlessly. Despite his obviously terminal condition, no one at court dared to suggest that the king was dying. English law considered predicting the monarch's death an act of treason. Consequently, doctors and courtiers maintained the pretense that recovery was possible, even as the smell of decomposition emanated from Henry's living body. On January 27, 1547, sensing that his end was near, he allowed Archbishop Thomas Cranmer to be summoned to his bedside. Unable to speak, Henry grasped Cranmer's hand when asked if he died in the Christian faith. This was his final conscious gesture. In the early hours of January 28th, at 55 years old, the once mighty king breathed his last. Yet the indignity of his condition did not end with death. Due to his enormous size, a special coffin had to be constructed to contain his remains. Preparing the body for the funeral posed a horrifying challenge for the royal embalmers. At the time, embalming was rudimentary, involving the removal of internal organs and filling the cavities with aromatic herbs. In the days that followed, as the body awaited the state funeral, one of the most macabre episodes associated with Henry's death occurred. The inadequately sealed floor beneath the coffin began to leak gases and fluids from the decomposing king, while the casket rested in the chapel of the Abbey of St. Sion. Contemporary accounts describe a chilling scene. Cadaveric liquid seeped across the chapel floor, discovered by stray dogs that licked the putrid substance. Chroniclers of the era recorded this grotesque spectacle as a deeply humiliating end for a king who had built his image on power, majesty, and divine authority. Henry, the mighty sovereign who had defied the Pope, reshaped the English religion, and sent two of his wives to the scaffold, ended as a mass of rotting flesh, violated by stray animals. His funeral finally took place on February 16, 1547, nearly 3 weeks after his death. Despite the unbearable stench, the ceremonies were conducted with all the pomp expected of a monarch of his stature. He was laid to rest in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle beside Jane Seymour, the only wife to bear him the long-desired male heir, Edward VI. Ironically, Edward, whose very existence had driven many of Henry's controversial decisions, including the break with Rome, would reign for only 6 years, dying of illness at 15. The throne then passed to Mary I, daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who attempted to reverse her father's Protestant reforms, and finally to Elizabeth I, daughter of Anne Boleyn, who would usher in a golden age for England. The grotesque death of Henry VI serves as a stark reminder of the limits of human power. The king, who considered himself above the law, capable of redefining a nation's religion and disposing of lives at will, ultimately fell victim to his own mortal body. His death was not merely the end of a man, it symbolized the decline of an era. Alison Weir once wrote that it is one of history's great paradoxes. A man who began his life with such promise, grace, beauty, and intellect, ended as a grotesque caricature of himself. Tormented by relentless physical pain and mental instability, feared and fawned over by those around him, yet seldom truly loved, Henry VI's transformation remains both tragic and fascinating. The evolution of Henry from an idealized Renaissance prince to a corpulent, ailing and embittered monarch serves as one of history's most striking case studies on how absolute power, chronic suffering, and progressive disease can warp the human spirit. While his political legacy, the separation of England from Rome and the establishment of the Anglican Church, continues to shape the modern world, his personal end is a stark reminder of human vulnerability. In his final days, Henry's labored breathing and deformed, decaying body were in stark contrast to the majestic portraits that immortalized him in his prime. This dissonance between public image and private reality stands as one of the most profound lessons of his life and death. He departed not with glory or triumph, but with an unbearable stench and a humiliation unfit for a crown. The man who had altered England and reshaped the course of Western history ultimately succumbed to the inevitable decline of the flesh, a universal fate that spares no one. His story endures not just as a tale of power, ambition, and transformation, but as a chilling reminder that even the mightiest are bound by mortality. If you found this story compelling and want to uncover more shocking tales from history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Leave your comment below, suggesting which monarch or historical figure you would like to see featured in our next video. Until next time, history continues to whisper its dark and fascinating secrets.